The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a turning point in human history. Steam engines, steel, and electricity transformed cities, industries, and daily life. Factories powered by machines replaced manual labor, while railways connected distant regions, changing how people moved and worked. Electricity brought new inventions: the light bulb, telephone, and electric motors, illuminating cities and powering transportation. Bicycles offered personal freedom. Early automobiles hinted at a new era of mobility, and ships and aircraft pushed the boundaries of travel. This was also the age of visionaries like Edison, Tesla, Bell, the Wright brothers, and Ford, whose innovations shaped the modern world. Life changed rapidly. People adapted to machines in their homes, workplaces, and streets, embracing progress and new possibilities. In just a few decades, society evolved more than in previous centuries. Steam power led to cars and airplanes. Simple tools became complex systems. This fast transformation shows how machines don't just make life easier, they redefine how we live, work, and think. As we look back at this era, we see how every new invention propelled humanity forward. Technology moves fast, and with each machine, the world takes another leap into the future. In the 1920s, sports became a powerful part of everyday life. Tennis and football, soccer, were among the most popular activities, capturing the energy and spirit of a new modern world. Tennis courts appeared in clubs, parks, and schools, bringing men and women together in a game that symbolized elegance, skill, and competition. Wooden rackets, long dresses, and white uniforms reflected the style of the era. While famous players inspired young people to take up the sport, football grew even faster. Matches attracted thousands of fans, and stadiums began to rise in cities across Europe and South America. Local teams united communities, and national tournaments brought excitement and pride. The game was simple but passionate: a ball, 2 goals, and the will to win. Schools also embraced sports as part of education. Physical activity was seen as essential for discipline, teamwork, and health. Students participated in athletics, gymnastics, and team games, learning values that went beyond the classroom. This period marked the birth of modern sports culture. Competition, fair play, and shared enthusiasm became part of daily life. The love for the game, whether tennis or football, would grow into a global passion that continues today. The history of locomotives is a journey through the evolution of technology, speed, and power. In the early 19th century, the first steam engines were compact and simple. They had small boilers and few wheels, like the early models used in industrial transport and short passenger routes. These pioneering locomotives were slow, but they represented the beginning of mass rail transportation. By the late 19th century, designs became larger and more efficient. Locomotives had more driving wheels, larger boilers, and improved pistons, allowing them to pull heavier trains over longer distances. This era saw the expansion of rail networks across continents, linking cities and nations. In the early 20th century, powerful articulated locomotives appeared, with advanced engineering to handle steep grades and long trains. Steam engines became massive, symbols of national progress and industrial power. Soon after, electric locomotives emerged, especially on busy passenger lines, bringing cleaner, quieter, and more efficient operation. These changes transformed daily life. Trains carried people, goods, and ideas faster than ever before. From the modest early engines to the giant steam and electric machines, locomotives were more than machines. They were engines of change, shaping modern society and connecting distant worlds. At the beginning of the 20th century, American cities were undergoing a dramatic transformation. New York and Chicago became the stage for a new kind of construction: the skyscraper. These massive steel structures rose from swampy ground, forcing engineers and workers to dig deep shafts and vertical tunnels until they reached solid bedrock. Only then could the enormous weight of these buildings be supported. High above the ground, sometimes more than 200 meters up, ironworkers, steel workers, placed and riveted the girders and beams that formed the skeleton of the towers. With no safety harnesses, no helmets, and no nets, they worked suspended over the void, balancing on narrow steel beams. Their courage, or their need to survive, was captured in powerful photographs, men hammering red-hot rivets, guiding heavy steel pieces into place, or calmly smoking a cigarette while the city stretched out below their feet. Working conditions were harsh and dangerous. One wrong step could mean death. The days were long, the labor exhausting, and the sound of hammers and rivets echoed through the steel like thunder. Yet these anonymous workers were the real builders of the modern vertical city. Thanks to them, buildings like the Woolworth Building, the Chrysler Building, and the Empire State rose to become icons of progress and industrial power. Every beam they set was an act of skill, every rivet an act of courage. This is how the vertical city was born, not just with blueprints and steel, but with sweat, bravery, and the sacrifice of those who built in the sky. At the beginning of the 20th century, the great cities of the United States experienced a true architectural revolution. Multi-story buildings, the so-called skyscrapers, began to dominate the urban landscape. Instead of traditional scaffolding, builders relied on gigantic cranes that lifted massive steel beams from the ground and set them into precise positions high above the streets. There, iron workers known as riveters were waiting, sometimes hundreds of feet in the air, ready to hammer the red-hot rivets that held the steel skeleton together. The American skyscraper became a remarkable achievement of industrial science. The tallest of its time was the Woolworth Building, reaching 241.5 meters, 792 feet above the pavement, with 60 floors and more than 30,000 tons of steel. Its express elevators, which skipped lower floors to go straight to the upper levels, were a symbol of modern engineering. From its foundations to its pinnacle, the building measured 276 meters, a record-breaking height for its era. Other steel giants shaped the skyline. The Singer Building, with 186.5 meters above ground, the Equitable Building, standing 148 meters tall and taking up an entire city block, and the Municipal Building, New York City Hall, rising 213 meters into the sky. Engineers of that era believed there was virtually no limit to human ambition. With the right building codes and steel as their ally, they predicted it would be possible to erect buildings up to 2,000 feet tall. Steel, both affordable and strong, allowed architects to create column and beam systems capable of supporting twice the weight of the tallest buildings of their time. This is how the vertical city was born, a blend of science, courage, and vision, where steel became the backbone of modernity. At the dawn of modern engineering, humanity had traveled a long road from primitive shelters to towering structures of steel and reinforced concrete. In ancient times, man took refuge in caves, building simple shelters from whatever materials were at hand. Civilizations like Egypt, Greece, and Rome left behind monumental stoneworks, pyramids, temples, and the Pantheon that still inspire awe. But their construction methods, though grand, relied heavily on manual labor, scaffolding, and monumental amounts of time. The industrial age changed everything. By the 19th century, iron columns and beams were being used in English factories, replacing wood and stone for their strength and durability. But the real revolution came with the introduction of reinforced concrete, a material that combined steel's strength with concrete's durability, allowing for structures that were both lighter and stronger than anything before. By the early 20th century, around 1920, construction had advanced so rapidly that monumental buildings could be erected in months, not decades. Cranes replaced scaffolding, lifting steel beams into place with precision. Reinforced concrete made possible wide spans, tall walls, and solid foundations, reshaping city skylines. Architectural traditions from ancient empires were admired, but modern engineers pushed into new territory. Inspired by cities like Chicago and New York, they designed colossal steel and concrete structures, bridges in the sky, buildings climbing higher than ever imagined. The Woolworth Building, completed with 30,000 tons of steel and reinforced structures, stood as a symbol of this technological leap. This was more than architecture. It was the triumph of science and engineering over space and matter. Reinforced concrete became the backbone of modern construction, practical, hygienic, fireproof, and enduring. It marked the birth of the modern city, a world where the dreams of past empires became reality in just a fraction of the time. The famous cement used by the Romans to build structures that still stand today was in fact a weak and loose material compared to modern cement. Portland cement was invented by Joseph Aspdin, a bricklayer from Leeds, in 1811. He gave it the name Portland because once set, it resembled the well-known limestone from the Isle of Portland in England. In the early process, 3 parts of white chalk were mixed with 1 part of clay or river mud. This mixture was placed in a washing mill with rotating blades, turning it into a creamy paste. The paste was then poured into containers, dried on heated iron plates, and finally burned in kilns to be reduced to powder. By 1920, cement was typically made from limestone and clay in rotary kilns or steel cylinders up to 3.66 meters in diameter and 76 meters long. A great open-air public concert in Buenos Aires, Argentina, one of the wealthiest countries at the beginning of the 20th century. Thousands of citizens delight in listening to the finest performances by great masters. In this way, in a city that aspires to the spiritual elevation of all its people, the creations of genius are brought to the masses, so that it is not only the privilege of a few to enjoy the splendor of art. A group of young women transporting and loading coal in Belgium. These young women were between 15 and 20 years old. After the German occupation, women were prohibited from working in the Belgian coal mines, leaving around 40,000 without jobs. Due to the great hardships that followed this measure, it became necessary to allow 5,000 women with no other means of livelihood to return to work under improved conditions. It was decreed that they would work only outdoors and no more than 10 hours a day. Steelworkers in Pittsburgh listening to a strike leader speak. Around 350,000 workers were involved in a possible nationwide disruption of the industry, one of the largest strikes ever threatened. Taylor's strike in New York. This line 4 abreast waits for the weekly strike relief of $10. It stretched for 3 city blocks and cost the union $80,000 each week the strike lasted. A rally of striking workers listening to a union leader in England around 1925, in what was for a long time the world's most advanced industrial nation. At the dawn of the 20th century, the role of women was defined within the quiet walls of the home, a space considered both kingdom and classroom. Domestic economy, or household management, was taught as a noble science. A woman, it was said, was the director of her household, the guardian of order, morality, and well-being. Her mission, according to the beliefs of 1910, was to balance time, intelligence, and money with prudence and grace. In photographs from the period, we see women gathered around sewing tables, learning the art of usefulness. They were expected to cultivate modesty, patience, and foresight, qualities thought essential for the moral health of the family, and, by extension, of the nation itself. Even in silence, the influence of women was said to guide every decision at home. Their vigilance maintained harmony, discipline, and love. But while these ideals placed women in the domestic sphere, the world around them was changing. In Europe and America, women entered universities, professions, and the workforce. They began to write, teach, and manage, not only the household, but also offices, schools, and hospitals. Sports like tennis and basketball offered new expressions of freedom. The same hands that once embroidered linens now held rackets and climbed ladders of opportunity. These scenes of movement and energy symbolized more than leisure. They reflected a transformation of spirit. From the kitchen to the classroom, from the sewing circle to the playing field, women were redefining the meaning of strength and responsibility. What began as lessons in domestic order became lessons in independence. A new chapter in the long story of women shaping modern life. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the past, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to discover more stories of history and change.